It was such a happy feeling. You came to the studios and there was a sort of hum and everyone rushing around, everyone busy, and going to the restaurant was fun because you saw all these actors and actresses and all the film crew and or the film, well, the people in charge, they were all there, and it was a sort of kind of happy family feeling about it. It was a it was an uplift to come to the studios then.
You silly mum. Yes, all right.
Okay. I haven't prepared anything.
Oh, good lord, it's like Blair Witch Project.
Shut up. Don't. You're being really mean now.
Yeah, I'm sorry about yesterday.
As you all know,
22?
Yes, 22 again. As you all know, we're screening Summer Holiday, which Dad, Andrew, was one of the producers on, and Liv was in at the very end. You've got to look for a girl, a little bit younger looking than she is now, with a wig and brown flat-plaited wig. And she comes on, comes off, so you've got...
Can you tell us?
Liv will have to shout out.
Yes, I think Mum might have to shout out before she comes on. And just to say that afterwards we're having drinks and tapas the venue has changed, so the venue that was on the invitation is actually not the place we're going to. We're going to Sangria. So if you come out of the screen on the green and you turn left, it's literally 2 doors along. And we've got, it's upstairs, so we're actually in a separate area, so we've actually got a whole floor to ourselves. And there you'll be able to have a selection of different kinds of tapas, vegetarian, meat and fish, and some wines, and whatever else you want to drink. So once again, just to wish Mum a happy birthday and hope you enjoyed the film. Thank you.
Hey there, Patashi! Hey, look, there's my passport. I'm a foreigner, do you mind? Listen, I'm an English citizen. I've got a British passport. Look, that's my face. Oh!
Till I found this magic glow.
Born just outside Trondheim on the 4th of June 1931, Liv had a happy but Victorian in character upbringing, which was violently disrupted when Germany invaded Norway in 1940. 2 years later, her father, to whom she was devoted, died from a heart attack, and her mother and the 3 daughters moved to Liv's grandmother's farm in the country. In her adolescence, they moved to a small apartment in Oslo, and following her gaining her Archim and a succession of temporary appointments, she eventually decided to train as a wireless operator. Now 21, Liv spent 3 years touring with the Merchant Navy, travelling to North Africa, the Middle East, India and the Americas. Her final tour with an oil tanker traversing the soon-to-be controversial Suez Canal. On a trip with her sister Karin, she arrived in London in 1955, where she met Andrew, who was not long after going to become her husband. And her life was about to take on another monumental change, as she found herself thrust into the heady world of the film industry.
It was a beautifully sunny early evening in South Kensington, and I was sitting having a coffee with 2 friends, a Norwegian and a Danish. Well, they were 2 lady friends, and I see this dark-haired, handsome man coming in with a paper under his arm. He was relaxed and sitting down and ordering a coffee. They didn't serve alcohol, I don't know. Anyway, so the boyfriend of the Danish girl comes in to pick her up, and he sees Andrew sitting alone there and goes over to say hello to him because they lived in the same block of a huge house in Redcliffe Gardens, just around the corner from the Boltons. So he brings him over to the table and introduces him to us and us to him. And then Andrew says, come back to my place and we'll have a drink together in my flat. And we all went down back, and I was his passenger, and the Englishman took the other two women, and we ended up in Andrew's flat. And then he gave us something terribly strong because he had been working on the cocoa market, and he got some extraordinarily dreadful drink which he mixed up with all kinds of things. Well, we knocked this back, and everyone became very, very happy. And then he said to me, I'll take you back home, or I'll take you back to your flat, which was 10 minutes walk away only. And then he said, asked me if I wanted to go out with him the following weekend, as he was meeting friends in Camden Hill, in a pub called Windsor Castle, the Windsor Castle. So that was how we began going out together.
Having only recently joined the staff of training executives, Andrew's first years were uneventful to the point of exasperating. But eventually he was given the opportunity to work on his first production, The Flying Doctor. This implausible premise had an American doctor flying around the Australian outback, filmed at Elstree Studios in Boreham Wood.
With Richard Denning, whose scientific passion turned to the fury of revenge.
It starred Richard Denning as the Doctor.
He was a B-movie actor, a very handsome man, very Germanic looking, very nice guy, and his wife was very lovely, and we had a lot of good fun together.
A permanent fixture at the studios, Leave had innumerable encounters with the stars of the day. One such encounter actor Cary Grant might have wished to avoid.
There was this tall, fabulous-looking man in the most beautiful, lovely suit, and he had these brown, very beautiful suede shoes, and he kept smiling and saying hello to everyone. And my little poodle, which was called Mitten, and she didn't see as high up as he was, and brown suede shoes was something that Andrew used to wear. And then she goes, and when she was excited, she did a little piddle, and she did that on his shoes, and he didn't mind. He said, oh, isn't she very cute? And my wife, she loves poodles, and that he was then married to Woolworth, Barbara Hutton, rather. And he looked up at me with the most gorgeous smile, so I was completely, after that, I was a fan, decidedly.
Before taking on his first production credit, Andrew worked on The Rebel, and Leave describes meeting the film's star Tony Hancock.
I was sitting in the publicity department because I was very good, sort of good friends with publicity people. They always asked me in, and they liked Mitten, the little doggy. And Hancock came in, and he was a charming man, walking up and down. He had a wonderful voice. I was rather surprised because I didn't expect him to have a beautiful voice, but he did. And he was very, very, very warm, very charming man. I liked him.
One film that always remained close to both Andrew and Leave's heart was his first credit, Hand in Hand.
The first movie was a smallish film called Hand in Hand, and it was an American or Canadian woman who produced it, and she had no idea what she was doing because she had never produced anything, so Andrew did all the work really, and she needed him very badly. And she became very fond of him, extremely fond of him. And we were very good friends, and she was a lovely person, actually.
Get to know her.
Well, at school, the bigger ones had a choir, and they put her in it because she could sing. No, he's not one for me, when Mary likes it.
And the film was a very sweet little story about a Catholic girl and a Jewish boy playing together, and they were going to, and the Catholic asked the Jew to come to his synagogue, and the Jew asked the Catholic, no, vice versa. the Jewish boy went to the church, and then they thought something terrible would happen to them. They would have a sort of some dreadful spirit would come and punish them for this.
Produced by Helen Winston, Dudley Moore's then girlfriend, Leave had first-hand opportunity to witness the legendary comedy duo Pete and Dud's mischievous behaviour.
So Dudley, of course, and Peter were, of course, chums. They weren't exactly chums, I don't think, but they were certainly all together a lot. So Andrew took me over and introduced me to Dudley and his girlfriend and to Peter. And then Peter came over and asked if I would dance with him, which I did. And then after that, I had won, or I was given a huge teddy bear by someone who had won this at a tombola. And when I went back from dancing with somebody, the bear wasn't there anymore. So I looked around and I wondered, where has it gone to? And then I looked over to Dudley's and Peter's table, and the teddy was sitting between them. So I went over and I said, I think this is probably, I think that belongs to me. And do you mind if I take it? And Peter said, will you give me your phone number? He was married, of course. And I said, what's your name? And I told him my name, Liv. He said, and your phone number. And I didn't give him my phone number, but I took the teddy bear.
Following this film, Andrew began a fruitful working relationship with Kenneth Harper, as ABPC and Leslie Grade decided to embark on financing a series of movies featuring our very own Elvis from Pound Stretcher, Cliff Richard. But right from the outset, the production ran into a few difficulties, not least because of the friction between Harper and the American choreographer, Herb Ross.
He was going to leave because he and Ken didn't get on, and Ken had different ideas to Herb, and Herb said, in that case, I'm leaving. And he raced off to Heathrow, and Andrew was chasing him, I think probably in his own car, and managed to persuade him to come back. And so this film was saved because Herb was an excellent choreographer. He really was fantastic. Well, up till then, British dancers, I'm not talking about ballet, of course, but they weren't, the musicals weren't as slick as the American musicals. The Americans had a very much more, they were much more professional about these things.
And here's Carol Gray, the girl from those West End hits The Boyfriend and West Side.
Having only lived in London for a few years, Liv was still a little unaccustomed to the idiosyncratic use of the language, so she was a little taken aback with the way one of the film stars, Robert Morley, greeted her one day.
I remember I came in to the Leslie Grade, they had a place in Regent Street, and I came one day to meet Andrew, and there was Robert Morley was sitting there, this lovely English, rather large man, and he said to me, Oh, good afternoon, Mrs. Mitchell. Oh, how... He said something about a good old Mrs. Mitchell or something like that, and I was not very old, and I thought, that's not very nice to say. Because I hadn't been in England long enough to understand that this was not really truly meant. He didn't mean it in a sense.
An outstanding success in Britain, the sequel Summer Holiday set its sights on a more ambitious production value by touring a red bus around bits of Europe and the back lot at Elstree. And it gave Liv her first opportunity to appear in a feature film.
We went on location to Lake Marathon, which is 2 hours from Athens, and there was a cafe there, and there was a lake, and of course the Marathon Lake, and then Cliff Richard was singing and dancing with this girl, Peters, I think she was something Peters, and then I was dressed as a waitress in a kind of Swiss costume, and I had huge long plaits, beautiful. And then I came on with a tray with drinks, and this was for Cliff and
We'll share a few laughs.
But the couple also returned home with an unexpected addition to the family.
Ken Harper, the producer, said, "We will have this St. Bernard in the film, because if it makes one laugh, it's worth it." So they brought the film. No, this beautiful big dog, and it nearly died in Rome because it was kept in some crates in Rome. It was terribly hot, of course, the poor thing. And then to Athens, and he was. Melvin Hayes is seen to carry this big thing. Of course he couldn't, but I mean they managed to make it look as if Melvin really carried this big, huge thing. And that was a laugh. Of course it was a laugh. So Ken said, "Now we'll put her down." It was a female, it was a bitch, Trudy. And I said, "Ken, you can't do that. You can't put her down." "Well, yes, but you know, it costs a lot of money, and then she will have to go in quarantine." So I said, "Yes, okay." And he said, "All right, then, if you want to take her, if you really want her, then we'll let the film pay for the quarantine."
Andrew's next film was with the radical and legendary Joan Littlewood, on her first feature, Sparrows Can't Sing. Leave describes how the eccentric theatre director called in Andrew's services after the film had run into difficulty.
He was asked to take over the production because the producer was simply no good, and everything had to be reshot. And Joan would phone up at 3 in the morning and say, "I've got a brilliant idea, Andy. We're going to shoot this like that, and you'll be with me now at 6 o'clock or 7 o'clock tomorrow." So he was shooting off to Merton, because they shot it at Merton in South London.
You
know what you are, don't you?
Yes, so leave off.
The close connection with the gangland kingpins the Krays, through the film's star Barbara Windsor, who was married to a member of their organisation, led to several cameo appearances from real-life gangsters. Though this gave the film an added credibility, it also led to some unusual continuity difficulties.
And they used to go to pubs in the East End, and they wanted to have continuity of the cast. And then when they're going to do a shot one evening, they said, "We want this guy who was here 2 days ago." "Well, you can't have him, because you know he's at the bottom of the Thames, because he had been disposed of by one of the Craig brothers."
In 1964, the same year that a lacklustre third attempt to maintain Cliff's film career was made, in the form of Wonderful Life, Andrew and Leave were also engaged in the production of Ken Russell's first feature film.
Ken Russell's first movie, which he never mentions because he is not impressed with his own film, to say the least.
Are you impressed with that film?
No. It's good fun to make.
Eve, Snake. Oh, what a deserted choice, sir.
Many congratulations, my dear. What an interesting costume.
Miss Adams is also one of the town hall employees. She works in the accounts department.
Oh, nice.
It was supposed to be a kind of a kind of Riviera, you know, BB, she was called MM, Marissa Mel, and she was sort of kind of emulating a kind of Brigitte Bardot, and it was supposed to be Saint-Tropez in Britain, and it had some good ideas, but it just didn't get it over very well, and Ken had wild, crazy ideas, and it just didn't work.
Pretty little turtle dove sitting on a vine, longing for her own true love. I do now for mine, as I do now for mine.
Something that health and safety would view dimly today, not least because of the insurance risks. Leave, who was not an official member of the crew, was recruited as an ad hoc stunt driver.
It was a kind of stunt driving part where Ken Russell wanted me to drive on the beach, and it was because this had to do with a lot of balloons, life-size balloons, and they were filled with gas, some sort of very explosive gas. I can't remember what, and they were propped up on sticks and bricks and everything like that. And then I was driving, knocking off. She was supposed to drive, but of course she didn't. So I had her costume and her wig on and drove like mad with the camera was mounted and the camera assistant as well at the back of this car, and everything was flying up, you know, all over, and I had to go bang into a huge heap, a mountain of balloons, and you had Roy Kinnear on one side and what's that ghastly actor?
Jimmy Booth.
Jimmy Booth on the other side. Yeah, he was the one, of course, who was also in the Sparrows. Anyway, and they were lying on either side, and they were frightened because they thought if I lost, they were staring, I would mow them down, which I would have done, of course. But I had to accelerate going into this mountain, but I couldn't see a thing. And I managed to do it for a while, and then suddenly I braked. And some of the balloons wound themselves around the tires, and huge billowing smoke, and it was very dangerous because I could have blown up easily. I think then Andrew got a bit worried about this because it was quite dangerous really. But I continued the whole of that day. I continued, and I was given £25 for that.
Believe it or not, there was a time when this was popular.
One time, a long time ago, in a land called Switzerland, do there live.
Seriously, only white people can produce music like this. Before working on Wonderful Life, Andrew had proposed the idea of ditching Cliff and the Shadows to do a film with Frank Ifield and the Beatles. The great organisation turned its nose up at this idea. No doubt the Fab Four are eternally grateful.
He listened to the people when he was sitting in the pub and they were talking about the Beatles. They didn't mention the Shadows at all. And he thought, this sounds very interesting, Rob. And he went to Leslie Grade and said, how about the Beatles? Have you heard about them? And Leslie said, well, I think the Shadows are much bigger or greater.
After the EMI takeover of APPC, Andrew was forced to go freelance, working on a succession of feature films, both as producer and completion guarantor, on The Ill-Fated Man's Fate, Please Sir, Murphy's War, and strangely camp yet dowdy Best Pair of Legs in the Business. But in 1973, he got the opportunity he had always wanted. Following on from Brian Forbes and then Ian Scott's brief tenure, he was appointed managing director of Elstree Film Studios.
His heart was really captured by the studios completely, and he was immensely happy when they asked him if he wanted to run the studios.
But the initial jubilation was tempered by the appalling prospect that he was brought in merely to preside over its closure.
After 2 weeks, they told him, no, you have to close the studios down. And that was a very unhappy year because that was absolutely ghastly. That was in 73. 4, I think.
The strain on Leave and Andrew's personal life was considerable, but he was determined to keep the facility open.
That was awful because he became so depressed, so vastly depressed, because he had to fire about 500 people and make the studios 4-wall, and people resented being fired. And then he said, you know, you will be rehired when we are starting to make films again, and you will earn much more money. But you won't be paid by the studios, you'll be paid by the films. Which happened to all the good workmen. They were rehired, and they realized that it wasn't really a bad thing at all.
One of the first features to resurrect the studio's fortunes was the immensely successful Murder on the Orient Express, where Leave discovered she had something in common with one of the film's stars.
I met him in a bar. I think he was doing something like darts or something, and we started chatting, and I said to him, I think your name is actually, you come originally from Norway, I think. And he said, do you think so? Yes, I think so. Vidmark is Videmark, isn't it? So he said, yes, I think it is. And he was very happy being Norwegian.
Well, there's a first.
During these heady political times, the studios became an area of interest with several significant political figures including Lady Faulkner and Harold Wilson, and another British Prime Minister who suffered the wrath of Leave, although she can't remember what she was so annoyed about at the time.
I met Heath once at a party sometime, and I can't remember what he had done which I didn't like, but I went over and I said to him, didn't think he had done a very good job or something, and he just sat there smiling. Big smile, nothing else.
The studio's ever-increasing output, which included Star Wars, Valentino and Julia, was temporarily halted when Stanley Kubrick practically monopolised the entire studio for 2 years, as well as Leave herself. Well, not for 2 years.
Well, he didn't ask for my phone number.
Probably would have been difficult seeing he's at the studios.
No, Kubrick, we walked around the studios in evenings sometimes, having had a drink, maybe at the bar, and we walked around, and then Kubrick was there and he was finishing off the film that he had been making for a long time, The Shining. And then we started chatting, and Kubrick was very talkative. I didn't expect him to be, and we just chatted for quite a while. In fact, quite a long time, like half an hour. And then he was going to a meeting with a group of people from the film, probably the producer and other people. And he said, I'm terribly sorry, I do apologize. I was sort of, I forgot the time. I was introduced to the most, not charming, he said the most delightful creature, and so I was held up.
Later on, meeting the female lead of The Shining, Shelley Duvall, at the premiere of Robert Altman's disastrous live-action recreation of the Popeye cartoon, she expressed how impressed she was at the hard work that must have gone into playing Olive Oyl.
I asked her, it must have been very difficult to act like that, because it was as if her limbs were really not made out of normal flesh and blood. And she said, oh, nothing like as difficult as doing The Shining with Kubrick. And she was in awe of him, and she collapsed on the stage a couple of times as well.
In the 80s, Elstree went from strength to strength, with films like Empire Strikes Back, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and Who Framed Roger Rabbit featured amongst the many blockbusters filmed there. It was a golden time for the studios. But for Leave, one of her fondest memories remains during the time of Andrew's producing days.
I think French Dressing was the most fun film to make, because we kind of took over the little town there, and we were always together at night, and Ken used to be crazy, and Ken Russell was crazy man. He was a really crazy man, and he sort of, let's go, and we raced up and down here and there, and we had dinners together and everything. And then I was teaching his wife Shirley to drive, and she was she hadn't the faintest clue. So we were whizzing around the countryside there in Kent, and coming up to corners, she would put her foot down, and I said, Shirley, you know, you have to brake, please. We would have ended up somewhere in the field or something. She was just as crazy, but it was a happy film to make, even if the outcome was ghastly. It was fun, and Roy Kinnear, such a lovely man, was.
Hi everybody. Just two things really. Firstly, everybody, hello. Firstly, I think we should propose a toast to my wonderful sister who actually organised this. I did a very minimal amount, so give her a huge round of applause. There you go. Yes, that was going to be the next thing I was going to say. Redundant now, and I think that much as she absolutely hates to do it, I think Liv should say a few words. A huge round of applause for my.
I have to say a few words.
You do.
I think it is quite absolutely marvelous that you're all wanting to come and for me, my birthday. And it's 75th at that. After all, it is a time of life where you think, you never know when you're going to get on this side of the family or Katrina, I do actually think you have done a most wonderful job.
Thank you. Well, it's also
you managed to do it.
It's the three of us.
It's fantastic. Really. And thank you all, every single one of you, for coming today, because I do really love every single one of you. I really, really do. Everyone for yourselves, because you're all very different from different parts of the world, and I do love you all immensely, and I think probably I can say absolutely my best friends, and for Katrina to be able to bring all of you together, it was the most unexpected thing for me in the whole world, and thank you so very, very much, all of you. Thanks.
Appreciate
So, raising glasses to the youngest 75-year-old.